The Floyd Rose FRT-4 is the very first Floyd Rose with fine tuners on it, and is most famously played very briefly by Eddie Van Halen on his 1982 Frankenstrat guitar. According to a guy who used to work in the factory on the Saka Fernandes blog, these are only in production for 4 months before they went to the FRT-5 whale tail version, because I guess Eddie Van Halen didn't like where the fine tuners are because he hit his hands against it when he was playing. In an interview with Floyd Rose, he mentions that he made the tuners as such because he didn't want to make it very big on the guitar. He didn't want to make the Floyd Rose an eyesore, I guess you could say, and that's why he made it this version. But it was quickly changed and to basically the versions that you see today. But there's a lot of interesting history on this that I'm going to talk about. First, here's an example of Eddie Van Halen in his 1982 Frankenstrat guitar. Eddie Van Halen had a gold prototype version of this. I heard there's either 3 of these made or like 25 of these FRT-4 prototypes. His was gold, and he has his Kramer. On this neck, it's actually a Kramer, 1981 Kramer Pacer neck that he sanded off the logo. I guess Kramer wasn't paying him at that time or something, so he sanded off the logo. I don't know, but he had it on this version of the Frankenstrat for a short period of time. Here's another picture of the Frankenstrat with the FRT-4, and I kind of agree with Floyd Rose in that this version of it, it doesn't stick out so much, or it doesn't extend as far, and I do kind of like that. He was on the right track, but I guess the artist didn't like it. Here's an example of a prototype FRT-4. This is exactly the same kind that was on Eddie Van Halen's Frankenstrat 1982. Notice how the saddles have an oval shape to them where the strings pass through to the blocks. That's key. That's only done in the prototypes. Also, there's no Floyd Rose signature on it. That's also a key aspect of the prototype FRT-4s made somewhere in 1982. Either 3 or 25 of these are made. The first and only time you see the FRT-4 in the catalogs is the 1983 catalog, which ironically also showed the FRT-3 for the first time as well. Here's an example on the FRT-4. Now what's interesting about this one looks exactly like the prototype FRT-4 that Eddie Van Halen has, except that had the Floyd Rose embossed logo on this. I didn't really realize this until I was looking through the catalog recently, but notice where the saddles, where the saddles are, it's more oval-like, okay? Keep that in mind. That's just like the prototype, but this one has the embossed logo. Eddie's did not, okay? Now this version of the FRT-4 looks almost identical to the last one. It has the embossed logo. Everything was the same as the last one I just showed you, but the saddles are different. They are not oval-like. They look more like a regular FTR-5. That's the difference, okay? So get confusing. And these are from the same catalog, okay? So they are slightly different. Also note that the production FRT-4s had the big steel sustain block that had a patent sticker on it, just like the FRT-3s, and these also had the T-blocks. Here's another picture of an FRT-4 from the 1983 Fernandes catalog. Notice this one's more like the prototype version that Eddie Van Halen had. Look at where the strings are attaching to the blocks, and you can see in that pass-through, these are more oval-like than the last one I showed you. Okay, so this is kind of more like the prototype, I guess you could say, FRT-4. And these were on, you could see these mainly in the FST 155s and 135s around this time. My guess, these are very rare. Probably one of the rarest Floyd Roses next to the FRT-1s and what they call the whale tail Floyd Roses, which I'm going to talk about in the next video. It had the humpback style locking nut like the FRT-3s and most of the Fernandes locking nuts on the Floyds. However, I'm going to show you evidence pretty soon of an FRT-4 locking nut that is slightly different than all the rest of them. This locking nut is from an FRT-4, and I've never seen one quite like this. So the regular humpback saddles have it's like a semicircle where they're clamping down. This one, as you can see, it's more like a V or apex like. I've never seen a Fernandes locking nut quite like this, and it's of course different than the FRT-1. So that's really interesting. Here's another example of an FRT-4. It's got the embossed logo. Looks like the saddles aren't oval like Eddie Van Halen's prototype. And I've actually only ever seen these in chrome except for Eddie Van Halen's prototype. I've never seen a black one or a gold one in person or on a photo besides Eddie's Frankenstrat. Here's the back of the FRT-4. Very important. This is that So on the back, now see how when it goes vertically up, it's all one piece. The bass and the vertical tuners are all one piece. I have seen a copy of one. They must have made copies of this where it's bolted from the bottom, so they're two separate pieces, and that's not a real FRT-4. There must have been some copy of some Japanese company made. So a real FTR-4, the bass and the vertical tuning piece are all one. The Fernandes locking nuts all have this 4508 number on these and these humpback saddles, okay? And I guess the prototypes maybe did not have that. That's just hearsay. That's just what I've been told, what I've read about. I'm not sure the truth in all this because, like I said, I'm making these videos because not a lot of us know these details except Floyd Rose, and he doesn't talk about it at all. In this era, they did not have the threaded inserts as the pivot posts. You had the screw type, so you had to screw right into the wood. And they probably did that until the mid-'80s, and of course all the Floyd Roses nowadays have the threaded inserts, which is probably an improvement. I found this picture somewhere. I think it's Steve Lukather of the band Toto, and it's with him with a Fernandes guitar with an FRT-4, which makes sense because I believe he did endorse Fernandes for a short period of time. The FRT-4 was only in production for 4 months because I guess Eddie Van Halen didn't like it. He told Floyd Rose, look, my hand is hitting these tuners, can you make something else? Then he started to redesign it, and I guess Eddie had input where he basically made the FRT-5, where they made a design where it's bent back a little more and still had the fine tuners there, and the rest is history. But so this was like only in place for 4 months. Like I said, this is a super rare model. But as I was strolling through the Japanese market, I was confused as hell because there's all these other things labeled the FRT-4. So I did all the research for you guys. It was a headache. Let me explain to you what Fernandes did with the FRT-4 after this. As I mentioned before, the FRT-4 was only in the 1983 catalog and soon disappeared from history. It's like it never happened. Floyd Rose rarely talks about it. No, actually, a lot of people only know about the FRT-4, the one I just talked about. It was gone, disappeared, until the 1987 catalog. Fernandes then labels this, naming it the FRT-4. And I'm like, what the hell is this? It looks like a regular Floyd Rose. This is during the Head Crasher days. So this is 1987. Watch the other videos I talk about this, but this is in 1985. Fernandes made a transition. They basically had to license out the Floyd Rose because they weren't making them anymore because they're making them in Germany. And they made this whole Head Crasher series where they redesigned everything, but they kept the FRT-4, 5, and 7 designation, okay? So this is the 1987 FRT-4, which basically looks like a regular Floyd Rose, right? And it's different than the FRT-5 Head Crasher. They're licensed in the 87, and I'll explain that later. So this is the 1987 FRT-4, which basically looks like a regular Floyd Rose if you see it today. Now in the 1988 catalog, they basically redesigned it again, and they still call it the FRT-4. And this one, it's really interesting because they actually had the fine tuners in the back. It's kind of weird. It's kind of like the perfected design that Eddie Van Halen wanted, right? The fine tuners are totally out of the way, and it's on the back. It's actually pretty neat. So now 1988, they still call it the FRT-4, but it's a redesign and looks totally different than the 1987 FRT-4, and they kind of keep this design for a little while. Also notice on the top is the FRT-5 that kept this design, which is exactly the same as the FTR-4, but you could actually change the height on the saddles, which is pretty interesting. I go over that in FRT-5 video, don't worry, but this is the 1988 FRT-4 redesigned. They basically kept the 1988 style for a while until this is the 1992, and I think it's still exactly the same, but it looks to me like the saddles, they gave a different cosmetic look to them, like a little blockier or more aesthetically pleasing. That's just what it looks like on this catalog. I'm not sure, though. The last time you hear of the FRT-4 designation is for the 1994 catalog. So from 1988 to 1994, they basically kept the same design, and 1994 is the last time you ever see it again. And eventually is replaced by the FRT-5 Pro and the FRT-8, and then down in 1997 they have like just as Fernandes on the base plate, FRT-10 they call it, and then they actually ironically in 1997-98 go to Schallers and Wilkinsons. Okay, let's start from this in the beginning really quickly. This is the prototype FRT-4 without a Floyd Rose logo and gold used on Eddie Van Halen's 1982 Frankenstrat. This is a prototype style FRT-4. It has the same saddles as the prototype one I just showed you, but it has a Floyd Rose embossed logo. This is exactly the same as the last two, but the saddles where the string passes through are slightly different. This is the 1987 Headcrasher FRT-4, which basically looks like a typical Floyd Rose you'd see today. This is the 1988 FRT-4, which basically it's redesigned again, and the fine tuners are basically on the bolts on the back, so they're out of the way, and the base plate just says FRT on it, not Headcrasher. This is the 1992 FRT-4, which basically is the same as the 1988 FRT-4, but the saddles have a slightly different design to them. This version would go on into 1994. 1994 was the last time you'd see the FRT-4 in catalogs, and the designation is never seen again.